Contraceptives were never designed to improve a woman's health.
Statistics, science, so to speak, is now verifying what the church has been teaching since the beginning.
God has put into our bodies this beautiful mechanism for fertility and for giving life.
Natural family planning forces you to appreciate the complexity of your wife.
God presented us with a unique gift that no other animal on this planet has. That spirit draws us to something more.
Natural family planning.
Natural family planning.
Natural family planning is
Empowering.
Life-giving.
Really a hidden treasure.
unifying for marriages, is the foundation for our marriage.
What a gift.
Natural family planning.
Natural family planning.
Natural family planning is
Freedom for marriages.
We're only fearful because we don't know.
I think the biggest fear is that it won't be effective.
I came from a family of 7 children and wasn't sure that this would work at all.
I grew up Catholic, but I never really was taught or was aware of this. And I always had that unknown of, okay, what are we going to do to control our family? I didn't know. And luckily, Megan had some background a little bit to even know of it, and she kind of brought me into it. And I was a little apprehensive at first just because I didn't know.
Well, my preconceived notions were that NFP was just kind of the Catholic Church's way to make sure that all women were barefoot and pregnant all the time.
I came to NFP sort of out of ignorance. I didn't know anything about it. Mike had the benefit of already knowing about it. So my first preconceived notion was that it was the rhythm method.
I'm the cradle Catholic, so for me it was sort of the default setting. You know, I was like, okay, well, when you get married, you'll do natural family planning or the rhythm method. I didn't really know the difference when I was younger.
Rhythm method was based on counting days each cycle. Problem with rhythm method is that not every woman is similar, and also every cycle is different. So the rhythm method's based on having regular cycles. Not all women have regular cycles. And also ovulation occurring at a certain time within the cycle, but that changes too.
From a cultural standpoint, I was a career woman of sorts and master's degree working. And so there's this sort of, gosh, you gotta have a house and be settled. And so there was a fear that I sort of started out with of a fear of my own fertility. I really started with a fear when we got married.
Those doubts and those fears always precede actually taking the classes. And they get a little glimpse of what natural family planning is and what it requires in the introductory class, but the conversion of heart starts to take place later in the process.
Most couples that come to us don't really know about NFP, even if they've been Catholic their whole life. And so Ernie was in that situation, and even I was. And I knew that this is what we were going to do, but I didn't really know what NFP was.
NFP teaches a woman to recognize the signs and symptoms of fertility in her own body. It's basically based on the fact that around the time a woman ovulates, there are certain hormonal changes, and those hormonal changes also affect changes in her body. So they'll have effects on the cervix, for example. So it may soften or open the cervix and it'll also stimulate the cervix to make a mucus that the woman can recognize if she's paying attention to it. In her body, she will also notice if she's taking her temperature every day that there's certain changes in temperature that also go along with these hormonal changes. And that indicates when her fertile window is. And again, it's based on paying attention every day to what's going on and learning the patterns of her own body and her own fertility. So the rhythm method isn't reliable, whereas NFP or natural family planning is.
Natural family planning is as effective as birth control when used properly.
I was pleasantly surprised when we actually took the class, like, hey,
Oh,
it
this
makes
makes
sense.
sense.
Using NFP, I think that anybody could benefit.
This is not just for Catholics, this is for anyone.
If you didn't take your blood pressure medicine, you couldn't say, oh, well, this blood pressure medicine doesn't work. You actually have to use it properly as prescribed. And couples who choose to use natural family planning and follow the rules have very high effective rate.
The more I went along with it and started to understand it, it really became
It breaks down
powerful.
those walls. Yes.
Broke down the walls and allowed me to just take it in and let God speak to me, and here we are teaching it. So it's been quite a transition. We found so many couples that just come in feeling right away that maybe they weren't excited to be there, but once they were there and they learned it, it wasn't so scary and they were able to continue on.
So I went into the introduction to NFP with my arms folded, with really not an openness, but as I went through the introduction and realized the health benefits, and that it worked, that the biological part of it, all of that kind of came first for me.
When we took our NFP classes, a few of our friends who were contracepting, who were married, joined us and came and took our classes with us because they really wanted something different for their own marriages. They were really tired of, you know, the chemical contraception and what it was doing to the wife, and just they wanted something a little more open, and they were ready.
When you actually learn about natural family planning, you can put a lot more faith in that than you could the pharmaceutical companies that are giving you the pills and the IUDs and all the other contraceptive devices and drugs. There's such a strong mentality in society today that if you have your birth control, you're set, and that's not really the fact. Not really the fact. Not really the fact.
Contraception is basically removing or attempting to remove the possibility of conception from the sexual act. And when we say contraception, it usually refers to artificial methods, whether they're barrier methods like condoms, hormonal methods like the birth control pill.
The effectiveness of birth control when taken properly is usually pretty high, although about once a month I take care of a patient who's pregnant on the IUD, and last month I had 3 patients who were using their birth control properly and they ended up pregnant.
The most common one is the oral contraceptive, and it's a combination of estrogen and progesterone. And most people don't really understand how this keeps a woman from becoming pregnant. But the number one way that the oral contraceptive works is by suppressing ovulation. But we know that these hormones do not always suppress ovulation 100% of the time. So the other way that they function is by changing the cervical mucus, making it sticky, a barrier to sperm to try to prevent conception from occurring when the egg and the sperm combine.
The third way that most people don't know about but is in all the literature, that it decreases the lining of the uterus, the endometrium, to prevent the likelihood of implantation. Preventing the likelihood of implantation means that the egg and the sperm that have united will now not be able to implant in the uterus.
That is called an abortifacient. Contraceptives work that way, and so does emergency contraception, which is a high dose of oral contraceptives.
So all these methods are meant to take something that's good, fertility, and a normal function of the body, and to render it useless, basically.
Contraceptives are made of synthetic hormones, and they carry with them risks for every woman who takes them.
Some of the major risks are stroke, heart attack, blood clots, and then lesser things like decreased libido, depression, weight gain. These are things that no woman would really want to have.
One of the well-known risks that's very well established now and came out in the Journal of the Mayo Clinic Proceedings in October of 2006 made a very good connection between the use of oral contraceptives and increase in premenopausal breast cancer. And I think this is something that every woman should become aware of. It's very clear in the literature, and unfortunately it's not talked about very often.
Pharmaceutical companies that pay for the studies of contraceptive effectiveness, they want to be able to show that it works and that there aren't harmful side effects. So there's an inherent bias not only in the research that's done, but also the education that that research supports. What the studies don't measure is the effect on the woman, on her health, on the health of her relationship, and some of those things are harder to measure, but they're basically ignored.
In learning about NFP, we could just leave it in God's hands and really be open to children. That might seem fearful, but I think the alternative is pretty scary.
At the root of many marriage problems is the use of contraception.
The first thing they think of is it effective in postponing pregnancy? But it's so much more than that.
Well, for starters, for me, just the fact that I'm not, taking anything that's mutilating or disrupting the natural flow of my reproductive system. I can still be a woman. And I think, unfortunately, in today's day and age, the strong feminist movement suggests that to be a real liberated woman, you have to be contracepting and pro-choice and dissolve your womb and become more like a man than anything else. With natural family planning, you're actually coming to know your body and trusting what your body does, when it's actually fertile, when it's not fertile. And if women understood that more, they'd realize that's true feminism right there.
As a medical provider, I think it's very important that we present all options and alternatives and the risks and benefits of each of those choices to our patients.
When we counsel patients to understand their fertility, we're not only encouraging them to use, to understand their own bodies, but also to cooperate in their health care.
How do you treat different female health problems? If you have the pill, it's a pretty powerful tool, and it can cover up and hide a lot of things. But if a woman's using natural family planning, or a physician is in tune with the principles behind natural family planning, he's going to be more apt to figure out what's really going wrong and to be able to fix what the underlying problem is. Physicians who are familiar with natural family planning and incorporate that into their practice, I think they're able to provide a lot better health care for the women that they serve.
Natural family planning is very helpful for people who are trying to postpone pregnancy, but it's also very helpful for couples who are trying to achieve pregnancy.
A woman will be monitoring her biomarkers of fertility, which include the cervical mucus, temperature, and changes in the position of the cervix. And when she monitors these on a daily and consistent basis after receiving instruction and follow-up, she will be able to pinpoint, along with her spouse, the window of fertility. And we know that there is a window of fertility. It's about a 7-day window. And this would be the ideal time for a couple to have intercourse to achieve a pregnancy.
We'd probably use NFP more than anything to get pregnant. We use it to find out, hey, when is our time, and really make sure we take advantage of that time. We found out that we were going to be fertile on our honeymoon, and we decided to just say, okay, well, that's whatever happens here happens, and just really being open. And there was just an incredible excitement to that as early as we could, we checked to see if we were pregnant, and we were, and we had our little honeymoon baby. And I think that strengthened us more than anything, because we have the greatest joy of our life.
Couples who have come to me who have started charting their fertility and using natural family planning have shared with me that it not only was a tool for them to understand their fertility and to empower them to make decisions about their fertility, but it also enhanced their relationship, their whole relationship, not just their sexual relationship, but everything around that relationship, their communication, and the level of intimacy that they had with one another.
Well, first of all, it's not birth control in the sense that nothing is being introduced into the act. And there are people that will say, well, what is the difference between using artificial contraception and using the natural means? They both have the same end, but it goes back to that old moral theology adage, the end doesn't justify the means. Contraception ends up effectively acting as a poison in the relationship. It takes what God has created, this beautiful act of the sexual act within marriage, which has two components, which are the bonding of the spouses and the procreative act. When contraception is introduced into that equation, it redefines what sex is meant to be by distorting and twisting it in such a way that it has become something that it was never intended to be.
NFP is a process of learning the real hard facts and interesting facts about how a real woman is designed by God.
Well, I think it's the freedom involved in NFP. It lets you understand just how your bodies were naturally made, what the processes they go through, and how that incorporates into all of God's plan for you, whether it's to have children at this time or not.
Natural family planning allows a couple to live their faith, to develop the strong bond between the spouses so that they have a strong marriage that really fosters communication, which is one of the biggest threats to a successful marriage, is the breakdown in communication.
We have to communicate on a monthly basis as to our family planning intentions, because we have to decide, do we need to abstain, or do we, or is this the time when God is calling us to be together?
You got to start talking about things that you may not have normally talked about. You have to reinvent intimacy from what we're raised with, what we hear in locker rooms, what we talk to our friends about. It brings everything out to a whole nother level, just expands it, amplifies it, and gives it more room to grow.
When we first got married, I was definitely thinking 5 years, maybe one kid. So from the very beginning, it just changed our way of thinking in regards to life and like our appreciation for life. So, and it still continues to alter our way of thinking. So it's continually a foundation point, kind of the point that we go back to in our marriage.
The conversion was gradual at first, but like a Mack truck hit me as soon as our first baby came. And I went, oh, wow, what a gift, and the beauty of this gift. And so then the conversion process was quick.
When the act is not prudent for that particular couple, they simply don't enter into the act, so the act is not being changed. There's no distortion.
Abstinence is the key, in some ways, of NFP, because it's where all the virtues blossom.
When you live in a society where it says, get it now and have it now and don't let anything get in your way from having it, NFP and the abstinence through NFP kind of says the opposite. It says, well, let's reconsider exactly what it is we're trying to get, and is it something that is good at the moment?
No matter what Christian tradition you come from, the idea of abstaining in your marriage is really not optional from a scriptural standpoint. Really, that's a great benefit to your marriage, your relationship.
I think even Men's Health recognizes that too as one of their top suggestions on how to strengthen, your sex life as a couple. They say you should abstain 10 days or so during a month. But even beyond that, the abstinence absolutely has been healthy for our marriage. Mm-hmm. It's taught us self-control. It's taught us how to kind of temper our desires and how to be in control of ourselves as a person, to let let the intellect control the flesh instead of the flesh controlling the intellect.
In life, there are things that are spontaneous, and there are things that are regular and planned by nature. I mean, the seasons come and go and are very romantic, even though we know they're coming and we know they're going. So a lot of the regular rhythms of life, we get used to, and they don't take away from the spice of life. They add a beauty to life. So to say that the only way of having romance is spontaneous sexual activity is rather adolescent.
He does the charting, so he knows when the abstinence is over. And so now I think it was our last pregnancy, we actually missed the abstinence. Well, I did, because I missed that longing and then that romance that comes after the abstinence.
That period of abstinence is a time of great strength and growth within the marriage, as tough as it is sometimes, of course, but
I think marriages, if they're not built on selflessness, they're not going to last anyway.
exactly.
So
It's one thing for a guy to say, you know what, I would die for my wife in an instant. I'd die for my family in an instant. If somebody came after them, I would give my life up in a heartbeat. And that situation's probably not going to come up. But the daily death of having to look at your sexual desires or your sexual lens and be able to die in that way in order to abstain at times that's really built integrity.
I love the abstinence in the way that it's changed him into someone who, or maybe it's changed me in my way in which I view him, because I know he appreciates my body, he appreciates and respects me enough to wait, and then he courts me.
I quote Paul's letter to the Ephesians. As a husband, love your wife as Christ loved his church. How much did Christ love his church? He died for the church. And so I tell the man, you're not necessarily asked to die physically for your human life to end, but when you have a desire that is not in the best interest of your wife and your family and you and the strength of the marriage, die to that desire for a greater cause. Say no for a greater yes, and they can grasp that.
Natural family planning forces you to appreciate the complexity of your wife and of women in general, and that's so contrary to the way our culture handles women and educates men.
Our culture likes to consistently bombard us as men with images of fake women, and this can color the perception of guys.
We are trained to look at women as objects, as vending machines for sex, pop the pill in, take what I want out. Men are trained from such a young age to see women that way, and then that just makes them more selfish. And natural family planning completely turns the tables on that. It really, if you are going to do natural family planning, you absolutely have to learn and appreciate and communicate about and make decisions based on the God-given complexity of your wife. And as a guy, that I can't possibly overstate what a benefit that's been, because it really is training the man how to love a woman.
That for me has actually deepened my sense of the mystery of Sharon and of women in general, and helped me to shift actually that paradigm that we as American males often are shaped in. So in that sense, my deeper sense of the dignity of women in general and of my lovely wife has benefited our marriage tremendously, I know.
To know that I'm married to somebody who supports this, who embraces it and honors it, he's showing such respect to me and to our relationship.
Having learned about NFP and then practiced it now for 6 years in our marriage, I can't help but feel that God created women complex intentionally, so that knowing men's inherent weaknesses, if they did lovemaking right, according to his plan, using natural family planning, it would force the guy to learn how to love his wife.
Every man wants to be valiant for his wife. They've just forgotten how. Natural family planning gives them a means to do that.
When I really started looking at why does the church teach what it teaches about natural family planning and contraception, it made so much sense.
Whether people want to say God created the body or not, its functions are obvious to the reason, to the act of human reason. The body, the human male body itself makes no sense by itself. The same with the female body. Without reference to anything else, it has no meaning. The two come together, they immediately have meaning. The body parts speak a truth. The body function speaks a truth. The church is not led by celibate men. The church is led by the Holy Spirit. And we can see when those celibate men themselves are thoroughly connected to Christ. We can see the work of the Holy Spirit, starting with Pope Paul VI, with Humanae Vitae. The gift of wisdom of the Holy Spirit that he received has now been proven by history. Everything that he predicted came true. And it has actually played out and is playing out to this day. And then John Paul II, not changing or adding anything to the church's teaching on the beauty of sexuality, simply elucidating it and articulating it in a way that hadn't been done before. And so now we see the difference between intention and reality. Your intention in using contraception, in entering into a sexual relationship, is because you believe it will strengthen a relationship. But now, the church's teaching, which has been consistent for 2,000 years, is being backed up by divorce statistics.
And trust has been huge, just trusting God to work within our marriage and just to put our relationship, our marriage, our fertility, and everything into His hands.
I didn't have that before NFP. It was more of a kind of a fear and a worry versus a letting go and going on the ride.
You know, there's no reason for us to wait, and we have trusted God and He hasn't let us down, so we're going to trust Him again.
I think that NFP is good medicine. It's really the medicine that we need. Contraceptives do not treat a disease. Fertility is not a disease. It's a sign of normal human reproduction, of good reproductive function.
How is it aligning with God's will? It's simply obeying the laws that He built into the human body. It can't get any simpler or clearer than that.
Just to be able to practice this method and bring God into our relationship has been the biggest benefit of all, because it constantly reminds us that God is the center of our marriage.
We are constantly putting our faith in other things, in other people, and there's a level of trust that natural family planning asks of a couple, but so does contraception.
You're either going to put your faith in something that a pharmaceutical company says is going to get you the result you want, or you're going to practice natural family planning, and in that case you're basically putting your faith in your biology as God designed and intended it.
The changes that have come over us in just in the 9 years we've been practicing natural family planning have been amazing.
It's relational oxygen, really, and living NFP really is. It's almost as if you have to try it to find that out, but it's true.
When people, Catholic and non-Catholic alike, hear the teachings of the theology of the body, they know it's true. Even if they don't want to accept it, they know it's true.
Abstinence is healthy for a marriage. I think that's hard to say, but it definitely is.
A lot of fun.
Tonight we're playing Yahtzee. So.
There's a lot of Scrabble playing during those fertile times when you're trying to abstain. Or watching The Office.
It's the time where I get the most back rubs, so I really like it.
Abstinence has actually turned him into a romantic man.
Yeah, call me Serrano de Bergerac.
Couples who have come to me who have started charting their fertility and using natural family planning have shared with me that it has revolutionized their relationship.
I feel really lucky to be in the position I am, that I don't provide contraception to couples. It's an opportunity for them to have true informed consent.
Certainly had some very happy patients that they have, that was available, otherwise they wouldn't have been introduced to it.
Is it healthy? Is self-knowledge healthy? Is good communication healthy? The answer is yes, and natural family planning facilitates that.